Welcome to Move Like This, brought to you by the Accounting Move Project and sponsored by Moss Adams, the Center for Accounting Transformation, and CPA Trendlines. On this podcast, we share ideas and hear from guests about how they find, retain, develop, and advance women and other underrepresented groups in their accounting firms. Now, on to our guest. Hello, and welcome to this new episode of Move Like This. I am really looking forward to having a second conversation on this podcast with Donny Shimamoto, who is with the Center for Accounting Transformation. And hey, Donny, you wear a lot of hats, much like I do. But one of the most meaningful, I think, is your work for the center. So tell me a little bit about what it is that the center does and how you're working towards your mission of improving the world one accountant at a time.
Thanks, Bonnie, and I'm so glad to be back. The center was formed, gosh, at this point, I think this is going to end up 3.5 years ago. And what it was, not just myself, but I've listened to other thought leaders. Everyone's telling people what to do, what to do. You need to do this, you need to do that, blah, blah, blah. And the questions people kept coming up with me afterwards was, well, how do I do that? And especially when they were a smaller mid-sized firm, they were like, I can't do that kind of stuff. Like, that's what big firms do. How do I do that? And so the center we really formed to really help with more of the how. This is how you do it. And we actually work with larger firms, but what a lot of what we do is we take kind of these enterprise or these big firm concepts and we scale them down. So we actually work with all kinds of organizations, and it's been really fun to also take things into a bigger perspective of kind of beyond just CPA centric, but accounting as a whole and accounting as a profession as a whole as well.
Yeah, so not just accounting firms specifically, but wherever accountants happen to be living or working, trying to help them out.
Well, not just accountants. So this is the other one that as we kind of work through things, we were looking at all of the other professionals that work within an accounting firm, like marketing, like you, right? And marketing. I know that the move has also looked at IT. So we look at what is it like for an IT professional working, whether it's inside the firm's internal IT department or being part of cybersecurity or a data analytics team that's doing client service. So yeah, we're really trying to look at the bigger picture.
I love that. Well, one of the areas where we overlap is DEI and B, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And it's a little bit of a tough time to be in that space. So, one of the most common critiques is that DEI focuses too much on identity over merit, leading some people to believe that underrepresented professionals in leadership roles only got there because of factors like race or gender. But as we know, in reality, DEI is all about removing the barriers that prevent qualified people from even getting to the starting line. So, why do you think that message was so easy to distort? And is there anything we can do to shift that conversation back to what DEI really is about?
Yeah, and I have to tell you, this one really hits home for me because being one of the early high achievers on the minority side, I was often the only Asian
Mm-hmm.
on even like this. I always think back to my first like big leadership role at the national level was being one of the senior committee chairs for AICPA. And when I was in that room, I was the only minority at the table that was a committee chair. There were some other in the room, but they were staff.
Mm-hmm.
And that table had myself as the person of color, and we had one woman, but she was white. And it was like, wow, this was maybe like 2010, somewhere around there. So kind of that was where I was like, ooh. And then seeing all of this, DEI stuff coming through, even back then, I mean, that was sometimes my question to myself was, well, am I being given the seat because I checked the minority box? Or do my achievements really warrant me being able to have this seat? Right. So I think a lot of what you said too is like it's not just in the bigger picture from an individual perspective. It makes me question like, hey, is there really value in what I'm doing? So I think we need to address that bigger picture. The other thing that I think is interesting, and I hear this from I'm going to say the white male side, is I've seen some of my colleagues, also ISCPA Leadership Academy grads, go, there's no opportunities for us. Everyone wants a woman or a person of color. So we're losing out on opportunities. So that was kind of interesting to hear, that line. And that started way back. I was AICPA Leadership Academy 2009. So 10, 11, 12 was kind of where I was starting to hear that. I still hear that even till today. And then when you look at it, the interesting flip, and I hear this argument used, by people that come from a more conservative side, is, well, if you take women who are half, and you take people of our color who represent another like quarter, I believe it is, uh, white men actually end up being the minority because they're only a quarter. So if we're doing everything for women and people of color, you actually are addressing the majority, and now we've got this minority that's isolated. Now, again, I don't know the validity of that from a statistical standpoint, but it was interesting. So a lot of these things have made me really say, well, can we look at the whole picture again? Can we kind of really look and reposition a lot of what we're doing, not just as DEI work, but as you said earlier, it's human work. It's work about our people and valuing all of our people.
Yeah. Well, and to build on what you were just saying, or I guess push back just a little bit on, when you look at the accounting firms, I will say, they really are generally about 50-50, women to men. I'm going to focus more on gender here.
No.
But within when you look at leadership teams, it's more like 25 to 28% women to men. So that's kind of where Move has lived. And a lot of this is, all right, we've got a lot of women that are going into the profession and they're getting promoted to a point, and then that drops off significantly, kind of at that senior manager director level. So and I think all of this is valid, and conversations we need to be having. But that's always been, an interesting thing to me is, or, kind of makes you wonder, okay, why is that happening? Some women remove themselves from the opportunity that themselves because they look at that role and it's not necessarily something they feel that they can do 100%.
Yeah.
But then there are others that just don't get the recognition or the opportunities that others do. So yeah, it's a good conversation to have.
Yeah, we can, and I can build on that too. So our DEI journey research that the center did, we found somewhat of the same pattern with people of color.
Mm.
So we haven't seen a lot of movement or an increase in the number of people of color at the leadership level. We've seen a lot with those coming out of the into the profession, accounting graduates, but we're not seeing them move all the way up to the partner level. So same kind of finding there. Now even that one, and again, my story might be an exception or a difference, but I've also always wondered that because I looked at it, I started my career at PwC, and it got to a point where when I got to be a senior, I looked at what was happening there. And this is not just a criticism of PwC because we see this in a lot of larger firms, especially back then, for perspective, this is like late 90s. I saw that and I was like, well, that's not what I want for
Mhm.
my career.
Yeah.
And so as an Asian male, I dropped out of that and said, well, I'm going to end up doing something else. In the end, I ended up starting my own firm, which I still have till today. And so I've seen this pattern with some of my other, especially immigrant friends, where maybe their language is not strong enough to be perceived as being able to move up in a traditional firm, let's say. but they've started their own firm. So I have like one friend that started his own firm. He could not pass the CPA exam because his language skills were not strong enough. And he's Vietnamese, but he started his own firm and he's serving the Vietnamese community in their own language. And he ended up becoming like an EA and getting his insurance certifications and things. And I'm like, he's still an accountant.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
doing taxes, he's doing bookkeeping, right? And he's advising those clients on how they can ensure that they have a better future and be successful. So those were other things where I was like, I think we got to change the way we're looking at these things as a whole.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I know a number of people who have gone that route, and a lot of the research on Gen Z is that they are more likely than previous generations to just say, I'm just going to do my own thing. And I think that will exacerbate in some ways the talent shortage that's going on. So, there's just so many different elements that we have to look at and consider. And I think having these conversations is important. And, however they wind up, knowing what the situation that we're in and that individuals are in is important. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
one thing we're seeing is in today's political climate, a lot of companies, and this includes accounting firms, that are pulling back on their efforts to build inclusive cultures or diversify their teams. For some, and understandably, it is out of a real concern over legal risk or losing government contracts if they have a lot of that type of work. But for others, it seems like it's more of an excuse to quietly walk back some of the policies that they never fully supported. So, what are you hearing or seeing in your work with firms right now? And are there common themes or trends that are standing out?
Yeah, so we're definitely hearing a lot of concern. Uh, you know, to put in perspective where I'm coming from, where we normally operate is more where are firms seeing risk? Because that's one of the big things we look at is the holistic picture of risk. A lot of what DEI and what politics is doing is it's changing the reputational risk
Mhm.
that firms are perceiving. Not just firms. I think everybody everybody is perceiving with association, with DEI, even with ESG, which is another thing that we work with. So it's not just DEI that's coming under fire right now. And so as you kind of look at that, you can't help and seeing the number of dollars that are stopping, right? I feel for them
Mhm.
because that's where well, it's actually resulting in impact to our revenues, or it's impacting in probably more importantly, it's impacting the client's revenues, and then the client's willingness because of that to then be associated with the firm or things. So it's this interesting interweaving of how closely we work with our clients, especially if you're the auditor and you're producing a report for the client. So there's all this interweaving. And so that's where I'm hearing a lot of that risk, and firms are trying to figure out, is the risk worth being able to put forward that, hey, we are pro DEI, we're doing all these great things, which is why I think, the important thing that we're doing in this collaboration that we've started is to start becoming a little more DEI neutral in the way that we're communicating a lot of this. Because we all know these are not just pro women, pro people of color. These are things that help everyone in the workplace be more successful.
Yeah, we've said forever that, what's good for women is good for everyone. Honestly, I think a lot of firms out there, I'm seeing things all over the map really, but some people are pulling down their, DEI statements off their websites and such like that, particularly those that have federal work. But many of them are still kind of living the philosophy of fairness and trying to expand their teams because we all see the statistics that more diverse teams make better decisions and that sort of thing because it's all about perspective, and if everybody has kind of the same history and experience in life, then your perspective is limited. I mean, it's just, and you're not seeing the full picture. But I am seeing some that are absolutely continuing to uh, try and make sure that they have good representation, and then others maybe not as much. But I had a really interesting conversation with Kimberly Ellison Taylor recently on a different podcast, and we were kind of talking about the term meritocracy gets thrown around a lot now, and I loved her perspective on it. She's like, bring it. Like, let's have a real meritocracy here. And she goes, I think really happens is people just want the opportunity to compete for these jobs. And it's the being able to compete side of things that sometimes gets missed in a way, or we're not expanding the pool as much as we possibly could be. So um, just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, yeah. I think, there's a lot going into there. You mentioned meritocracy, and those discussions actually came up with affirmative action, all the way back in the 90s. And that was also an interesting journey to see where initially, was the intention was minorities, and then especially for us as Asians, all of a sudden we were actually the perception, again, I'm going to make sure I use that word, the perception that Asians were actually discriminated against because we had a high number that were going into higher education. And even till today, there's this perception that Asians are overrepresented in the accounting profession because we have a lot that are PhDs, we have a lot that are working at firms. They may not be at the partner level, but there are quite a number in there. And so it's been interesting to me to kind of look at a lot of what's going on, and they say, well, we're not going to focus on Asian because we have a lot of them in the profession. We have enough of them in the professions. To me, is kind of the implied thing there.
Yeah. And to me, it's like we need people. This profession needs people. They need smart people who are interested in the work and with different skills, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, you have the people that honestly just want to sit there and crunch numbers and do what they need to and just, stay at their desk, and that's their happy zone.
Yeah,
That would make me absolutely insane. But we also need those people that are gonna, be working with clients and the more consultative kind of work and all of this kind of stuff. So I think for us to say we've got too many of anything or any type of person is kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. Let's talk to everybody out there and see if we how we're going to fill these jobs that need to be filled, and fill and create firms where these people want to work and want to stay,
exactly.
which
Exactly.
is leads me to my next question. Because this year, both the Center for Accounting Transformation and the Accounting Move Project are teaming up to reach a broader audience, gather more data, and to create reporting that can have hopefully a substantial impact on firms of all sizes. Any firm that wants to participate in the survey can do so for free this year. And those that want firm specific confidential analysis and advice can upgrade to receive a confidential firm scorecard that we will put together for them. So let's step back a little bit, and what made you want to collaborate on this year's Move project? And how do you think this partnership can help firms take a more meaningful, actionable steps toward becoming those firms where people want to work?
Well, part of what we really wanted to do first was make sure that we were honoring the history of Move. And Move has been around since 2010. You've got a ton of great data around what's working, whether or not practices are getting adopted, the impact of these practices, right? So part of it is we don't want to change the fundamental underlying view or purpose, which is looking at which of these practices or which business practices really help improve people's ability to be successful in firms. So that piece I think is really important, that we're not just shifting and changing everything all of a sudden. We're really working together to embrace a more neutral framework And what we really think this helps do is further increase the credibility of this research by removing some of the assumptions and really focusing on real world outcomes, no matter which terminology a firm is choosing to use. So
Mhm.
I think that's one of the key things. And also, in the spirit of inclusivity, I feel like, and we actually learned, the center learned this lesson from our DEI research, because when we did our DEI research, I pivot a little. When we did our DEI research, we realized we actually did not have a path for firms that were small and mid-sized firms. We didn't have a path for small and mid-sized firms because they pretty much said, well, this isn't applicable to us because DEI is about diversity and we're too small. We can't get the diverse, we can't meet the metrics of diversity in there. So that was one lens, additional lens we added to kind of try and change things around. The other one that we realized we were missing was what we call deniers, people that say, well, this is not important. And by adopting this more neutral language, we're enabling smaller firms to participate and say, well, we do these things, and also for to look at deniers or people that are might even you might even call them anti-DEI. It doesn't have to be all the way to that end, but people that are like, well, DEI is not important. Well, as you and I have discussed, these are not DEI things. These are human things. These are people things. So which of these people things does your firm do, and are you successful, or and how successful are you, and what are you seeing? And let us compare how successful you are to everybody else. I mean, whether they're DEI pro or not. And let's really look at what is really working. Who are we seeing be successful?
Yeah, and that's something that there's been a lot of study and research and conversation around is particularly now, generally if you take the DEI language off of things and describe the benefits that people are receiving or the programs that firms are putting in place or whatever that is, so many people are generally supportive of it. Now we'll look at the research that we're doing and kind of see how that shakes out. But it's funny how just the term itself, there are people that have a visceral reaction to it. But when you're kind of take that language, which can be divisive, out of the way, and then just talk about what it is that firms are doing, many more people are supportive of it. So I do think that's going to be a really interesting way for us to, do this research, and hopefully it allows everybody, like you say, even deniers, to take a look at things and say, oh, I see how this could be beneficial.
And then tying back to some of where we started with this, it also removes the risk. So participating in a DEI affirming survey might be perceived as a risk. Well, we're supporting this program and we're cited in this research that's positive. Now it removes that risk because now we're saying, well, we're looking at this from a much broader lens. And so firms shouldn't be afraid to participate in this anymore.
Well, and two, our primary area of research every year, move studies, of course, the four move elements: the money, opportunity, vital supports, and entrepreneurship. But this year, we're really diving deep on the theme of retention, which is something that every firm really has to be thinking about and looking at. I mean, we've kind of talked ad nauseum about the talent shortage, but you need to be able to keep the people that you want to keep within your firm so that they can promote and become your next generation of leaders and serve clients and all of that. So I'm really excited about talking to firms and finding out what the ones that are really successful at retention are doing and sharing that with the rest of the profession.
With you on that. So I mentioned that our DEI journey, the center's DEI journey research showed that we are having that retention issue. We're getting students in and they're graduating with accounting degrees, but they're not staying until partner. Along with that, our staffing strategies research actually showed that there's a lot of activity in the recruiting space but not as enough maturity in the retention space. And so that's again another reason why we wanted to partner with you guys, especially this year, because that's really, if you can stop the bleeding, you need less staff coming in. It's actually a good thing. Or you can, if you can retain them and your firm is growing, well, now you again don't have to get as many coming in, and you have more experienced staff that are, you know, have the experience to work with the clients and can actually allow your firms to do more advanced things like advisory work as
No,
we go forward.
for sure. So, looking ahead, what advice do you have for firms who want to innovate, attract, retain top talent, and continue to meet client needs? And when DE efforts face the additional scrutiny that they are now, how can they authentically communicate their commitment to inclusion, both internally to their teams and externally to their clients, in a way that's going to be heard by everyone?
I, I think a lot of this, we always have to come back to the fact that DEI, or I'm just going to call them people practices should not live in a vacuum. You shouldn't be doing them just to do them or just because there's social or political pressure to do them. All of these things really need to be tied back to the firm's strategy. And I will say that sometimes the firm's strategy is actually anti-diversity. Now, I know people are going, oh, what do you mean? Right? So when we did our research on DEI, we found these examples. There was a firm of mommy CPAs. So when you look at a strategy like that, it's actually pro-female, in fact, predominantly female when I looked at them. Almost, I think there was only one male working with their work. And right, and if we were to look at that, yes, it's pro-female, great. Is it anti-male? Their answer was no. So, and they had one male working there. Uh, is it diverse? It is not.
Mm-mm.
So this is why we say we really got to look beyond just diversity. And you said inclusion. What's your firms be doing for inclusion? Actually, one of the big shifts that we're thinking is that it's not about inclusion, it's about belonging. Does someone that works for you, with you, feel like they belong as part of the firm and part of the team? And that belonging is actually what creates the strategic advantage. And I'll give you a couple more examples that are that are anti-diversity. So two of the firms that I interviewed in our DEI journeys research, both kind of mid-sized, one had adopted Christian values as part of their culture and values. Another one had adopted Jewish values as culture and values. Now, team members were not required to be Christian or Jewish. Team members were not required to follow religious practices or dogma, but the values were what was included there. And it was, kind of written into some of the things, references to God, these things. So if we were following sometimes, the whole diversity and we need to be neutral on everything and we need to not have these types of references, we would have said, well, those firms are not actually good firms. But when you look at it and it's the incorporation of values, it's the incorporation of culture and the creation of belonging that became important. And so that's what I would encourage firms to look at. Start with your business strategy. And then how do you take that to attract the right people, not everybody, to attract the right people and really be able to have them feel like they belong as part of the firm. That's going to create that retention.
Mm. Well, and I think, well, I agree with you. I think belonging is definitely a concept that we need to think about quite a bit. And, maybe in some ways it does replace some of the other language. And it ties back to what you were saying at the beginning about being the only Asian person at the table and you didn't feel like you belonged there. And you did. I mean, you were there for a reason. Now, I think you were included, but you didn't feel like you belonged. I want to reword that.
Exactly. Yes.
And, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth by any means, but I can see how that would feel awkward, even though okay, I'm smart. I have the knowledge to be here. I, was chosen to be a part of this group for some reason, but when you have that doubt in the back of your head or don't necessarily feel like you do belong there for some reason, you're not going to give 100%, because you're thinking about that as much as you're thinking about what you're there to do, I would think.
Completely. Completely. And and then tie that doubly. So I had the double doubt in my head. One was that around the racial aspects of it. The other was the meritocracy aspect. Do I actually deserve to be here, or am I just the token one that's being promoted? Right. So it kind of plays on both parts.
Yeah. Wow. I am very excited about the things we're going to learn this year and the research we're going to do and the firms we're going to talk to and all of that. And that will be kicking off very soon. But I want to close with just some, we don't have to think real hard about it questions, fun ones that I just always enjoy getting to know people. So, um, what we've talked a lot about jobs in the accounting space, but what was the most unusual or unexpected job that you've ever had?
When you shared these questions with me, I was like, oh, that's a hard one because I actually kind of feel sometimes like I'm the boring one because almost all the jobs I've done have actually been in accounting because I was one of those that knew what I wanted to do from high school. So the ones that I think people will not expect was actually that I actually worked at Godiva,
Mm.
selling chocolate. Part of that is those of that know me know I'm a foodie, so chocolate's one of my loves. But I actually worked in Godiva after I had started my own firm. So I had worked at PwC 3 years, I think it was. I worked at PwC 3 years. I had worked at a large IT consulting firm for a year, and it was after I left there that I went and worked at Godiva. The reason I did that was because one, my friend was the manager, but I explained to her I have all of this tech, well, not just textbook, but kind of like business knowledge. But I really want to understand what my clients are going to go through. And I wanted to work with small businesses. Now, Godiva itself is not a small business, but the Godiva store by itself, right, is. They had a great program on customer service, what we today we even call customer experience, because it was like from the moment someone walks into the store, how do you make them feel welcome? How do you introduce them to the product, which is a higher end product, which sometimes is intimidating to people, right? You're not like at this lower end Hershey's or whatever. You're coming into something where you're paying a premium. So all of that, as well as just the day-to-day, will show me how you're managing your cash. How are you teaching, your team that a lot of them might be high school or so I was trying to learn all of that kind of really operational stuff. And I think actually learned quite a bit. I'm very thankful for her letting me do that. I ended up actually working with them for 2 years off and on, just as kind of like a seasonal hire. And I would help her because it was just fun. It was different from anything that of my other office jobs.
I love that. Oh, I've had all kinds of jobs that maybe we'll get into one of these days, but we do not have the time to go through that resume today. Well, you just mentioned that you're a foodie. So, what is your go-to comfort food or favorite meal or thing that you eat because it's like, oh, this is the best?
So the one that probably is the biggest one is it's called wonton min. It's basically the soup dumplings, Chinese soup dumplings with noodles, but it's a very specific dish that we have here in Hawaii. Because if you go and you order it in other places, you'll normally get the Hong Kong style one, which is not the same way we have it here in Hawaii. But that's my go-to food.
Oh, I still haven't been to Hawaii yet. So,
Oh, you gotta come visit.
um, well, if you had a time machine that could take you into the past or the future for just one day, where would you go and why?
Ooh. Just one day. I didn't realize that was just that one day. Um, if I can answer without the one day,
Sure.
it- just given everything that's happening, I actually would love to go back and kind of see how Abraham Lincoln navigated everything that was happening during the Civil War, because I feel like we're kind of on that path again. And I just want to understand and kind of learn. I'm like, how are you thinking through this? What are some of the assumptions that were made? How is, what's the communication strategy? All of this stuff to really help bring the nation back together again.
Wow, that would be I want to read that research report for sure. Being that, I've been in the South my entire life, well, sort of most of my life.
Well, and there's a lot of research reports, right, and historical novels that were written, but that's where I want to be there, like kind of in his head to
Mhm.
see like how did he think this through? What were the things, or what were people telling him, and how did he react, or how did he use that information?
How did he process what he was getting to turn it into the decisions that he made?
Yeah.
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 All right. And finally, what is the last show you binged or book that you couldn't put down?
Gosh, this is gonna make me sound like I'm like all in in our topic, which I kind of am in my head, but um it really was adolescence. So it was the Netflix show, and then it was the teenage boy and how all of the things, impacted him and what they think and happened and how he came to commit this crime or not. That was really powerful for me because that's one of the other things I look at, it all comes back to our research. There's all been this focus on women, and then I'm seeing and I'm hearing all of the impact as well, just society as a whole, not just in accounting, on men and boys. And I definitely resonate with some of that because I see that happening. So that was my binge.
Ah, okay. Yeah, you're gonna have to get out and do something completely silly. So, we will probably run into each other at some conference or something like that. And yeah, we're just gonna go, I don't know, skip through a park or something like that. Well, it is so good, as always, to talk to you, Donnie. I really appreciate it. And I'm really excited about the work we're going to be doing together for the Accounting Move Project and bringing in the center's help and perspective. So, for anyone interested in learning more about the Center for Accounting Transformation, you can go to improvetheworld.net. And to learn more about the Accounting Move Project, of course, go to accountingmoveproject.com and feel free to reach out to either one of us directly too. So thank you again. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you for letting us be part of your important mission.
Thank you for listening to Move Like This, brought to you by the Accounting Move Project and sponsored by Moss Adams, the Center for Accounting Transformation and CPA Trendlines. If you'd like to learn more, visit our website at accountingmoveproject.com. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends and colleagues too. I'm your host, Bonnie Buol Ruszczyk, and until next time, keep moving forward.